Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh on the Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, fresh back from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, where the Bears lost 21-16. The day after, it's Overreaction Monday. This is dropping after we're going to discuss what happened in Indy. What the heck happened in Indy? Dan, how would you describe the tone at Halas Hall the day after the Bears? Really bad loss.
Yeah, so there is a new format here for our audience to know that on Mondays after road games, we do our interviews over Zoom. So you don't get the greatest feel inside the building of what Halas Hall is like. But I do think that we had three pretty good voices today, from Matt Eberflus to Cole Kmet to Kevin Byard, to put their own respective spins on how everyone's feeling up there. I do think that each one of them had a different tone. We'll get into some of that here in this episode and hear some of the voices they have to say. I do think there is a collective realization, though, David, that what happened Sunday was something that should not have happened, and that they better get themselves squared away really quickly. Otherwise, you risk this season sort of slipping away very quickly.
And the timing really stunk. The Packers win again with Malik Willis on the road, no less. The Vikings 3-0, one of the biggest surprises in the NFL and one of four unbeaten teams. And oh, by the way, the Lions, they're back. They beat the Arizona Cardinals in another road victory, and Jared Goff completes the first 14 passes. So the Bears picked a bad day for the worst effort. Definitely, let's start things off with our opening drive.
It's time for the opening drive.
And the word of the day is urgency. The Bears didn't have enough, and they certainly have some now.
They better, right? Because like what you're looking at, and I just had a conversation offline with somebody that asked, what do you think about this week coming up? You know, the Rams are coming to town. And I said, when you have a football team where you have questions and you go into a game where you're not quite sure which way to lean, you usually sort of err on the side of picking the better coach and the better quarterback. In this instance, the Rams are 2-0 in that department. They have the more established quarterback in Matthew Stafford. They have the better coach in Sean McVay. And so you're going to have to be sharp. The Bears were not sharp on Sunday, David. You witnessed it. I witnessed it. Everybody who tuned into that game or sat in a seat at Lucas Oil Stadium witnessed it. There was a level of just incompetence that led to a losing football effort, you know, and so you walk out of that building at 1-2 because of all of the errors and mistakes you made, from play calling to timeout usage to blocking to being unable to stop the run to taking care of the football. And all of a sudden you're in this situation where, again, it's not the result itself, it's the way the result came to be. And that leaves you with plenty to scratch your head about and plenty to be concerned about. I'm sure you felt that all morning as you kind of process this loss on the Mully and Haugh Show.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think that fans are entitled to overreact however they want after a loss that bad. I made the statement on Monday morning, which is what echoed in our post-game podcast. I mean, everything that you felt about the Bears heading into the season, all of that optimism and enthusiasm, it was fair to question all that you thought that you knew based on how poorly the Bears played and performed against a Colts team that I don't really think is very good, and against a quarterback that isn't quite ready for prime time in Anthony Richardson. Completed 10 passes, just didn't look like a polished product. He looked like a guy who had played 20 games and started 20 games since high school. So, Dan, let's get to some of the speakers we did hear from today at Halas Hall. I'll let you set up what Cole Kmet had to say first, and then Kevin Byard, because I think that if you're looking for two guys that really represent the players well and can express themselves, they picked the two right guys.
It's a good way to put it, because they are two guys who not only represent the locker room well, but they do know how to express themselves very directly and very candidly. And so I thought their voices today were valuable, particularly coming on the heels of Matt Eberflus, who has continued to strike a sort of a positive and encouraged tone about the progress they're making. And it was, sort of balanced by some of the direct comments that Cole and Kevin Byard had to offer. I'll start with this, because Cole Kmet, if you recall, in July, the opening day of training camp, was asked about the realistic timeline for this offense to come together with a rookie quarterback, with a new coordinator, with a whole new system being put in. And he didn't hesitate. He said, now. The urgency has to be right now. The thing has to get going quickly. And I think his direct quote was, there's not going to be time to kind of meander through this thing. We've got to get this thing going quickly here. I thought this was an apt time to revisit with him those sentiments at a time where 3 games into the season, the Bears offense hasn't found its groove. They haven't found its identity, and they haven't seized the now. And so I asked Cole about where he's at mindset wise, given what he said in late July and given what he's experienced for the first 3 weeks of September. Here's that exchange.
The word you use, urgency, is definitely needed, and not that we don't feel that, but we got to continue to have that urgency to get better every day. I think you also got to blend with that of not getting too overwhelmed or too frustrated by what's going on, and we got to keep things tightened here. And I think Coach said it well the other night. When you drop 2 in the NFL, that's adversity. So we've dropped 2 in a row here. And offensively, we haven't played up to the standard that we've wanted to yet. I think it's gotten better each game. But again, we're being real. Right now, better is not good enough. We got to be better. We got to be much better if we want to win these games. And you look at the positives from the other day. We were able to sustain some drives and ran the ball well at times, and then obviously put up some really good numbers and pass yards. At the quarterback position there. So that was all good to see. And, we're able to control the clock, but we got to be able to punch the ball in the end zone and get points. And I think that comes down to that. And then the number one thing is taking care of that football. And, despite the performance against Tennessee that first week, the one thing that we could come out saying is that we took care of the football, and we need to get back to doing that. And I think if we take care of that at the very least, we'll start winning some more games.
So, David, you know how we like to find T-shirt slogans. There was a perfect one right in the middle of that. I know you were kind of nodding as Cole said it. Better's not good enough, right? Like, improvement is not good enough for the 2024 Bears. Winning is the standard now. It doesn't mean you have to win 13 games. It doesn't mean you even have to win 12 or 11, but it does mean you have to understand that better is not good enough, that you have to do the things that create winning football, and Cole was very direct there.
He's also right about the turnovers. We talked about how bad the offense was against the Titans, but they did protect the football. That's the minimum bar you have to clear. And since then, it's been a little sloppy. Now, there are things that contributed to that on Sunday against the Colts. Caleb Williams didn't see Jalen Jones on one pick. The other one, Rome Odunze, could have made a great catch, but it was also thrown into double coverage. The third turnover came because our speaker there got beat one-on-one in pass protection, and I'm sure he didn't want to discuss that, but he did own it. I give him credit. He was accountable. Cole Kmet, I think the more I hear from him, and it's great to always hear from him, I think he's the next analyst in town. He's going to be the next Bears analyst.
I was going to tell you. I was going to say the next head coach. Not the next head coach, but sign him up, because for a guy that can create real talk, that just direct to the point, real talk. These are grown men who play this sport. They don't need things sugar-coated. This is the reality. And Cole expresses the reality more consistently, maybe than any player that I've been around in my decade plus covering the league. And it's refreshing because you just don't have to do this awkward dance of like trying to dodge around what's real. You just acknowledge what's real, you address it, and then you figure out ways to either improve it or continue to build off of it. And that's what Cole does there. As an extension of that conversation, our colleague Jason Leisure of the Sun-Times pressed Cole on the idea that, look, like maybe this loss 2 years ago is one you can just chalk up to of like, we're undermanned. We don't have the horses to win that game unless we play close to perfect. That wasn't the case on Sunday. And so Jason kind of pressed Cole about how in a non-rebuilding year, a loss like that really stings. Here's the back and forth between those two.
Cole, with regard to what you just said, how do you manage those perspectives of you are trying to be patient with Caleb and with a new coordinator, but this is not a rebuilding year for you guys. And
right.
A game like losing to the Colts is really costly to you guys in the long run.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say it's not. I think that's a game that, you look at our roster and look at theirs. I take ours over theirs any day of the week. It's not a game that I think we should have lost. But now looking at it from sitting in this chair now after the game, it is what it is, and now we're a 1-2 football team, and we got our next game here coming up against the Rams. But at this point, really, all you got to do is learn from the mistakes from the weeks prior. You acknowledge that the steps that you've taken, but we understand that there's a lot of things that we got to get better at. And that being said, there's still a lot of football games left, and there's a lot that can happen throughout the NFL season, and there's no reason to be in full panic mode inside the building with a 1-2 start here. I mean, we're one game away from being 500 again, and like I said, there's just a lot that can happen throughout the NFL season, and I've seen that before. So it's important that we just stick to what we're doing and stick to our process and continue to go to work every week and continue to grow. And I think from that perspective, just having a good outlook on it, a positive outlook on it when we come back here on Wednesday for practice and attacking the week. I think we'll like the results that we see, but we gotta keep our eyes forward and keep our feet where they are.
It's good stuff. I like the way he compared rosters and concluded that the Bears is better than the Colts. I mean, you don't hear that often from a player talking about an opponent, even one they just lost to. So that's indicting on the coaching staff. I think he probably realizes that and doesn't care, or at least he's saying it responsibly enough where it doesn't come out as like bus tossing.
Well, I think it's it may be interpreted as that, but I think it's also an acknowledgement that like talent only gets you so far. You have to be crisp.
That's
and
it.
To Cole's point, like the block he missed on the Latu strip sack, like just handle that. Like, I told you last night on Sunday night, and then saw it with my own eyes again on the All-22, that when they watch that play through the All-22 lens, they're going to see Rome Odunze wide open for a gain of 25 to 30 yards. And it's there for them. And if Caleb Williams has 3/4 of a second longer to throw the football, it's a completion that moves the chains on a potential go-ahead touchdown drive. Instead, it is a strip sack turnover that turns into the game-sealing touchdown drive for the Colts. And that's this league, right? Like, you take care of the details, every single player on every single play as much as humanly possible, and create a winning effort.
So before we get to Kevin Byard's comments, I want to ask you a follow-up on the whole Cole Kmet situation, because it does lend itself to this idea that when you have self-aware players who understand how the dynamics work and they understand an NFL locker room and the realities of the league and all that, like Cole Kmet, like DJ Moore, who we spoke to on Monday morning on the Mully and Haugh show, like other guys who are pretty plugged in. How do you think they feel after? I talked to an ex-player about this as well after the show. How do they feel when it's 1st and goal from the 4, and the first down you run a wildcat, and then you run a couple runs out of the shotgun formation, and then you run a speed option left against the goal line defense? Don't you think at some point in time, all this self-awareness, while it's great, but it might be, I don't want to say backfire on the Bears, but don't you think they must talk amongst themselves? Like, can you believe he called that? Can you believe they called that? Can you believe what we're doing offensively? This is pretty early in the Shane Waldron process to have, any kind of that, backlash. But I do wonder, with these guys who are so self-aware, don't they wonder what's going on here when you're playing chess and you just don't need to, you can get away with playing checkers?
Well, that's just it. And so there's a couple things I can answer there. The first one would be, I think they feel confusion. I think that's probably the prevailing emotion that they feel in those moments, because look, like, you make a great point there that everything you do doesn't have to be predicated on a look you get from the defense, particularly on 4th and 1. You need to have an FU play or 2 or 3 in your playbook where you say, I don't care what defense they line up in. We're going to run this play and we're going to do it better than them. And we're going to pick up 1 damn yard, right? We're not talking about anything more complicated than being able to pick up 1 damn yard in a situation where you really need it. And I think they got a little bit too fancy with the things they were trying, instead of having some sort of bread and butter play that that you can run really well and better than the opposing defense can defend it, and that will get you in the end zone. And they've got to find that identity soon, because it partially cost them a football game on Sunday. And if it costs them another one, the crisis in Chicago is going to grow larger. Now, to your point about the self-awareness and the expression of it, there was a comment that Caleb Williams made post-game on Sunday afternoon that I thought was very well said, and it was delicately said, but he really, really sort of emphasized the need for communication. And what I heard and interpreted in what Caleb said in that moment was, we have to talk to our coaches and we have to tell them how we feel about some of these plays and some of these moments. And we have to express ourselves in a way where we're all on the same team, and we're all fighting for the same goal. And we have to create purpose and saying, look, like we've got to be better. And we all acknowledge that together. So now let's work together to do what we want to do in a way that's successful to create winning football. You can find that little soundbite from somewhere within the 12 minutes that Caleb talked to the media after the game. I heard a very emphatic statement of, this week is very important for everyone to find themselves on the same page and to do the talking directly to one another rather than in factions on the sidelines and in the locker room and in the coach's office. Let's bring it together. Let's have the circle and let's get it out there and let's correct it really quickly because there's a lot at stake.
That seemed to be the gist of what Kevin Byard had to say during his Zoom on Monday. Dan, what was the context of the questions to Kevin Byard, and how would you describe his state of mind?
Yeah, so like Kevin comes at this, number one, as a longtime veteran who's been through a lot in this league, and he understands that like riding the roller coaster in this league is difficult to do if you don't have the proper equilibrium to handle it. He also knows that you have to compartmentalize your side of the ball and the guys that you play with versus the other side of the ball when the other side of the ball is struggling as mightily as they are. And so I was kind of probing Kevin in a two-question back and forth about how the defense finds a way to bottle up its frustration with what's happening on the other side of the ball, knowing that it probably is the reason that they are 1-3 or 1-2 as opposed to 2-1 or 3-0 right now. And so there's a little bit of a back and forth about that patience process for the defense. Here's me, here's Kevin Byard, here's the back and forth.
Kevin, as one of the designated leaders on defense, how do you do your part to keep the defense patient with the offense as it tries to find itself and not fall into that trap of feeling a little bit snake bit by the fact that they're not keeping up with what you guys are doing on your side of the ball?
Yeah, we just got to try our best to just not really worry about what's going on that side of the ball. We have to do our jobs. At the end of the day, this is a professional football league, and we all get paid to do a job. I get paid to play safety for the Chicago Bears, and I have to make sure I continue to do that job. It can be frustrating at times because we want to win. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants to win, but it's not a point in the finger type deal. Sometimes emotions are shown. But at the end of the day, we have to continue to do our job because I've been in situations in this league, man, where the offense has been struggling and eventually they get the ball rolling. And once everything is rolling, then, we can make a real run. So, like I said, we just have to continue to do what we need to do, force turnovers to try to win ball games. And that's what it's got to be until things change. But until then, we have to continue to just do our jobs and try to make sure that we're just locked in on that.
As a captain, do you have to vocalize that to the other guys, or do you just assume that they're in the same mindset you are?
No, I mean, just really just reminders. I think everybody kind of understands their position. At times, like I said, when you're in a football game, emotions are high, but at the same time, you have to continue to remind ourselves that, hey, let's just do our jobs. Let's do what we need to do. Let's go try to get a turnover. Let's try to do more. When things aren't always good, I think the first thing you always have to do is look yourself in the mirror and look at yourself first and see what can I do better? What can I do more? To try to win a ball game. We've seen that happen week one. So I think we have to continue to have that mentality really as long as you play in this league. That's kind of how it goes.
Good stuff from Kevin Byard. I think that it's interesting to hear the two different tones, both assertive, both strong, but the different sort of states that the offense and defense are in, you hear from the respective leaders.
And you can understand why, listening to those two guys speak, I had the vibes I had going into the regular season where I bumped the win total up from 9 to 10 because I felt like the locker room was in good hands. I felt like they had guys that would be able to manage the adverse situations like they're facing here after a 2-game losing streak. We'll see, right? They have now faced the test. Cole said it there in the outset that you lose a couple games in a row in the NFL, it's real adversity, and you have to find a way to manage it and cope with it and channel your energies in the right direction. Major test for the Bears in week 4 because it would be really easy to go down about 7 different roads this week with what they've experienced the first 3 weeks of the season. They're going to have to pick the most productive one, and we'll see which one they choose. Before
we get to looking at week 4, let's look back at our QB1 review from the Colts game. Okay, Dan, we know the category, defining moment. Bright side, big number. Let's start with Caleb Williams, QB1's defining moment.
It's unfortunate for me because this is a 363-yard output that Caleb Williams had. He had the first 2 touchdown passes of his NFL career. He looked like the potential superstar that we have classified him to be. But the defining moment for me is when the ball is ripped out of his hand by Laiatu Latu. And it's not any fault of Caleb Williams. It's Cole Kmet didn't hold up in pass protection. The Bears didn't have enough help for him protection-wise. And as we talked about a little bit ago, a really legitimate chunk play turned into a turnover that turned into the game-sealing touchdown for the opponent. That's life in the NFL. We talked last week about how the Bears had the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to go lead a go-ahead touchdown drive. We talked for 3 years about Justin Fields' inability to have the ball in his hands in the final 8 minutes of a football game and go lead the team down for a victory. No matter what the circumstances are, that's how teams and quarterbacks are judged in this league. Caleb Williams had an opportunity there. It was ripped out of his hands by a rookie edge rusher from UCLA, ironically. And all of a sudden, the Bears are stuck staring at 1-2 and licking their wounds and trying to figure out a way to get better.
UCLA 1, USC nothing. I mean, that had to be somewhat satisfying for Latu because it was just one of those things that, it can't happen. But you're right. It's one of 2 weeks in a row, fourth quarter. You got to be consistent with how we judge things. I guess that was pretty defining. I'm going to go with the second interception because I think it typifies just a couple things. Wasn't that, in terms of the accuracy, wasn't that bad of a throw because Rome Odunze could have made a Devontae Adams-like catch and come down with it in traffic. And if it hits his hands, right, people say he should have had it. But at the same time, there was an arm in there, and it did make it increase the degree of difficulty. And then the deflection was picked off by Jalen Jones. So I think at once it was all, oh boy, nice throw, good identification. But why are you forcing that throw? Because bad things could happen. Oh, and a bad thing did. And so it was kind of like indicative of a 33 of 52 day for 363 yards and all the stuff that comes with a big statistical day. But it was close, but not enough. And so that was kind of like the story of the day. And the second interception is again, 2 weeks in a row, you have that second pick, and you want to avoid those kind of mistakes. So I think that was his defining moment. Close, but so far away.
Matt Eberflus indicated that there was probably a safer pass available for Caleb in the flat. Look, you also don't want to take away all of the aggressiveness out of your rookie quarterback because Caleb did identify that he had a defender with his back turned and made a throw to a receiver that he's developing chemistry with. More on that in a moment. And so there is a fine line between having that aggressive mindset and becoming an ultimate game manager. And they're working through that a little bit right now. Understand why you chose that. And you're going to be sort of picking up on a theme as we go through today's QB1 segment for sure.
Next category is and there were too many to choose from.
Okay, so let's account for the other turnover. We accounted for the strip sack, we accounted for the second interception. My moment is the first interception because to me this one was 100% on Caleb Williams. He was out of rhythm in the play. It happens at times in the NFL, but you have to recognize when it's happened and not try to force things. He didn't get to where he needed to go in his progressions fast enough. And by the time he did, Braxton Jones was being pushed back into his lap and he couldn't generate either the power with the rhythm he had or the power with his throwing window to get enough mustard on the pass to the outside of DeAndre Carter. And Jalen Jones was there. And 10 times out of 10 in the NFL, if you're late and you lack velocity to the outside of the field, the ball's going to get intercepted. Bad things are going to happen. That's exactly what happened. Learning experience for Caleb Williams. He's got to get over that really quickly. The other problem with that, David, is the Bears were already into field goal range at that point. And so, you took 3 points off the board in a game where you're trying to create scoring opportunities, where you're trying to create momentum. And there you have it. Another moment where you torpedoed your chances. And again, we talked about this on the Sunday postgame pod. I could not fathom and still cannot fathom that the Bears walked into halftime yesterday with 0 points on the scoreboard.
Terrible. Okay, that's a good one. And because you took one that was easily we both could have taken, you're going to force me to be somewhat unfair and unpopular here for my moment. But I think it's not totally unfair if we're going to be consistent with how we look at Caleb Williams. We both have described him as a future star. He's a franchise quarterback, a generational talent. These are guys who one day we think are going to share, be in the same class as Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, the guys who are best at what they do. If you are that guy, you have command of every aspect of the operation. You've got to be the guy that is really an entity unto himself, where you don't need to rely on the coach for the little things. When Caleb Williams threw that touchdown pass to Rome Odunze, oh my gosh, wasn't that cool, rookie? Oh yeah, wasn't this great? We were on Hard Knocks together. Oh boy, we were back at the draft together. I love you. No, I love you more. Let's figure out who's going to keep the game ball. No, stop. That doesn't matter who keeps the ball, the first touchdown ball. They talked about it so much that it became a thing. They were kidding around and thinking, you know what's happening? Nobody's lining up for the 2-point conversion. And if this happened to Joe Burrow, if this happened to the Bengals or the Chiefs or the Bills, nobody's blaming the head coach. They're blaming the quarterback because the quarterback is the CEO of the offense. The quarterback is the most important employee in the organization. So the quarterback shouldn't be worrying about a memento. Who cares? Go on eBay, get it later. Get the team ready for the 2-point conversion because you've thought about this during the drive. You thought about this for the first snap in the huddle when the series began about 2 hours ago because it was the longest drive ever. It was a long drive. How many plays? Goodness sakes. 13 plays. Was that? Yes.
13 plays. Yeah. 13 plays, 70 yards.
So about the third play, you got to be thinking if you're Caleb Williams, we're going for 2. We're going for 2. Look at the score. We're going for 2. You're not worried about whose mantle that ball is going to sit on. Knock it off. Do your job. You're the quarterback. You could have saved your coach the embarrassment of needing a timeout because he couldn't remember. Oh, wait, are we leading or what's the score here? I've got to do the math. Where's the card? Whoa, someone talked to me in my head. What am I doing? I'm worried about the next blitz package on the next defensive series I've got to call. Matt Eberflus is doing too much. He's multitasking. He holds up 1. No, Matt, 2. What are you?
Well, that's what I was going to say. What happens if while you're trying to celebrate the touchdown, the coach is throwing the 1 finger up and you
That's
go,
why you don't celebrate the touchdown.
We got a few more seconds to celebrate because Cairo's coming out to kick this extra point to pull us within 4 because general math tells us that 4 is right where you need to be. I'm with you on that.
Save Lucy from himself. Okay.
I'll just add to this because this is interesting as well because you're talking about having overall command and understanding as you grow into the role in this league, the responsibility of having command. Caleb Williams had the opportunity to check out of the doomed 4th and goal speed option play to the left, and he got out of the huddle and he felt like he didn't have enough time to alert the second play call and get them out of that look without potentially taking a delay of game penalty or creating confusion that created a penalty. Caleb Williams also has the opportunity to call a timeout there and to say like, man, coach, I apologize. We got out of the huddle a little late. Didn't like what I saw, but this play's too important not to do this correct, you know? And so like that is something he's going to have to learn as he goes, that like, if you start to feel a little bit, understand the situation. And so that's another potential moment where it's like, okay, if you see that extra overhang defender over there and you don't really like the call, just take the timeout. Just take the timeout, apologize for it later, get everybody cleaned up and move on there.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission. All right, let's go to the next category. Bright side. There were some things on the bright side. What was yours?
47-yard pass to Roma Dunze. My God, like that was what we were looking for the first 3 weeks of the season. One of those moments where the arm talent of Caleb Williams is undeniable, where you just feel the rush of what that did for the team. The ball placement on that, absolutely frustrating for an opposing quarterback, absolutely exhilarating for a receiver. That play was so beautiful, and it was really the key, David, that unlocked the Williams to a Dunze connection. 6 completions, 112 yards, a touchdown that you just talked about with a pretty cool celebration at the end of it. You've got a situation here where you see 2 guys who are expected to have a really long relationship together, starting to find that timing, that chemistry, that rapport that you want to have. Sunday was a step in the right direction for those 2 guys. There's no question that's a bright side in a loss that was otherwise pretty gloomy.
That's a good one. I would go on the bright side. I would think there are a couple different third down passes to Cole Kmet. You get point out. You get a couple little good, like where the ball just needed to be and the velocity that he showed.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that were on the bright side for Caleb Williams. I think you could find enough moments where you're like, oh wow, you know, it wasn't perfect, but he did throw 52 times and look good. But I'm going to go with the Hail Mary. I think that even though it didn't end up in a touchdown, the fact that, you know, it was successful, the fact that the quarterback, you didn't have to substitute for somebody to throw a Hail Mary. You actually have a starting quarterback that could get it there. That's pretty cool. And it was a completion. So when you have, 44 yards to DJ Moore, you take away that, by the way, DJ Moore, you take away that 44 yarder, he's averaging like 5 yards a reception or something. But that was on the bright side for me. They completed a Hail Mary pass.
It was 44 yards and 3/4, I think, because that DJ Moore, I didn't realize in real time how close to the goal line he was when he caught that. It felt like to me he was outside the one. Man, he was a hair outside the goal line when that ball found his hands. And credit the Colts for keeping him out. That's a frustrating moment for sure.
You take that away, and DJ Moore caught 7 passes for 34 yards. That's almost laughably small. Okay, so the last category in our QB1 review, the big number. What's your big number? 5?
My big number is
5?
5. It's the number of Caleb Williams turnovers and their 2 losses. You heard Cole Kmet talk about it in that soundbite just a few minutes ago, that the Bears took care of the football in week 1. They had 0 giveaways, and they won the football game, and they got out of there. It's a really, really cliche tenet in the NFL, but it's cliche because it's so true. Ball security dictates results more often than it doesn't. And even though, the 3 turnovers on Sunday weren't egregious, and there was some nuance to each one of them, got to take care of the football. Anthony Richardson gave you 2 gifts. If you come out on the right side of the turnover margin there with the 2 interceptions he threw to you, you're probably getting on the plane back from Indianapolis with a victory, and everything, the tone, the tenor, the tumult at Hallis Hall is far different than it is right now. And so that for me is it. Like, Caleb will learn that. He understands that going in. It's not like he's a reckless player. He knows what this is all about, but it's just about adapting to the NFL game and knowing, particularly with this defense, that ball security is going to be a huge part of which direction the season goes in. Not good enough on Sunday. The result shows that it wasn't good enough.
If that continues for a couple more games, you're going to have to dust off an adjective I don't think I've used in several years, but it would be Cutler-esque.
I thought you were going to say Barkley-esque, the Matt Barkley game.
No, that's a really obscure one. Nobody remembers Matt Barkley. I think Barkley-esque, people think you're just being bombastic on television. Cutler-esque would be being careless with the football and yet being high risk, high reward type of approach. You don't want him to turn into Caleb Cutler. I think he has been, maybe some people derisively referred to him that way before he, was a Bear, but I don't think you want that to happen. So I think that's a good number 5. My number, the big number, as we wrap up our QB1 review, is 52. 52, the number of passes that he attempted. Actually, 56 was the number if you add the 4 sacks. And I think you said 60 with the number of pass plays called. You could pick any of those numbers, but 52 is the one people will remember this game for. 52 pass attempts. This is not how you develop a rookie quarterback. This is not how you develop an offensive identity. Now, unless you want your identity to be like we're gonna be the team that is the smoothest, most finesse team and the softest team in the NFC, but I don't think that's the Chicago Bears. And I'm not being old school meatball traditionalist. I just don't think you want to be the team that throws 50 times a game. Even Caleb Williams during the post game was surprised they threw 52 passes. So I don't think he was ready for that. I don't think that you want to make a habit of that. And when you throw 52 passes, you aren't doing something right. And the Bears didn't run the football well effectively. They weren't able to establish the run against the worst run defense in the league. And so they had to throw 52 times. So that's a big whopping number that you have to try to avoid moving forward.
3 notes on that, because there was actually 60 pass plays called. You got 52 throws, 4 sacks, 1 scramble, 2 pass interference penalties, and a roughing the passer penalty that resulted in that. So that's a note there that you need to keep tabs on. And we talked on Thursday, David, about the Bears trying to play from ahead. When you're playing from behind, the pass totals start to go up and up and up. So one of these weeks, the Bears are going to have an opportunity to play from ahead. I think they've had the lead through 3 weeks of the season for 7 minutes and 35 seconds. And that's the final 7:35 of the season opener against the Tennessee Titans. That's not good enough. One last note, since you like my obscurity here. There was an article, it was either in the Sun-Times or the Athletic. People that follow this podcast can figure it out. But Matt Barkley's career was said to have been resurrected by the Chicago Bears coaching staff when he was here in Chicago. Either the Sun-Times or the Athletic back in the day, just for those who are into obscure footnotes.
Resurrected? Would you say resurrected? Did I miss that? I mean, I know that I went to radio, but I don't think I missed that.
Google search
Okay.
Matt Barkley, resurrection, and see what you find.
All I know is last time I saw Matt Barkley, he was trying to resurrect the crowd in the Coliseum because he was like the guy who went back for homecoming for USC's first home game. So anyway, yeah, Matt Barkley, he was a pretty good interview. He was very obscure. All right, let's go to our final category and segment and moving the chains. All right, before we get out of here, I want to ask you what you thought about the contrast in styles. This is definitely nothing to do with X's and O's, but it does have to do with potentially where the season is headed. Matt Eberflus after the game drove me a little bit crazy just with we saw a lot of positives there. Well, we got to take away a lot of good things. We did a lot of nice things. Well, I just don't think the Bears did anything really that well to where your head coach set that tone. To me, it smacked of too much complacency, especially for a team that came into the season with realistic playoff aspirations. You contrast that style with, meanwhile, out in Las Vegas or down in North Carolina, the Red Rifle beat the Raiders. Andy Dalton beats the Raiders. Nobody expected the Panthers to beat the Raiders. And afterward, Antonio Pierce, former player, linebacker, good player, tough guy, talks tough, inexperienced head coach, not a guy as seasoned as Matt Eberflus as a lifetime in the business or a career in coaching, says that his players were making business decisions. And then he's not going to, and so that's going to compel the Raiders to make some business decisions, essentially threatening jobs in the post-game press conference. Maybe not the most professional approach, certainly not the most polished one, but I do think it was passionate and it was real. And I wonder, Dan, in today's NFL, I don't know how the players react to one or the other. Is today's player going to be more responsive to somewhat coddling that Matt Eberflus saying, hey, wait, nice try, guys. We got some positives. Or Antonio Pierce's, we're going to make some business decisions. If you can't play any harder than that, then you're going to be gone type of approach. What do you think?
It's a good topic. And I probably have some personal biases just being a coach in a younger demographic, right, in the youth sports ranks. But I do feel like this is very case by case. And I feel that like when you are the head coach of a team, you have to understand how to push the buttons of every player individually. Obviously, you have to do it as a group collectively, and you have to figure out how to set that tone to get the results you need. But you better have an understanding of how to go around to each individual guy, each individual position group, and press those buttons in a way where you get response out of them. And there's no tried and true formula for it. I do understand the outside worry about whether Matt has enough command of the room to resonate, right? Like that is still a question that is worth asking with this football team in season 3 of the Matt Eberflus era. And I kind of pressed Matt on this on Monday, asking him, like, how do you go about creating that accountability where when you want to emphasize the positives and you want to feel encouraged by improvements, that you still make it very clear when something is unacceptable, when a performance, when a play, when attention to detail doesn't meet the standard, and Matt sort of talked about just trying to find the way to create that level of collective understanding of what accountability means in their building. But there better be a firmer tone behind closed doors, in my opinion, than there has been in front of the cameras, in front of the media, because you have to take what Cole Kmet said at the outset of this podcast and create urgency. And sometimes urgency requires a raised voice. It requires a bit of anger. It requires an understanding in the people you're talking to that what you just put out on the table is not up to snuff, and you better be able to correct it and fix it. And so I understand why you raise this question, and it is certainly one worth keeping on the radar in the next few weeks for certain.
Well, nobody knows their team better than the head coach who's been here for 3 years, or at least one would think that. So, and he also, I want to be clear, I'm not necessarily even picking a side here. I think it's an interesting contrast in styles for guys who are different style of coaches. But Matt Eberflus, we've always said, boy, during the Hard Knocks 6-week honeymoon, it was like, isn't he authentic? And don't you like him being, who he is? He doesn't try to be who he's not. And maybe that is consistent with his personality, him taking guys, there are a lot of positives to come out of this. And I know that's how you have to coach guys and people, and certainly youth sports. That's the way you have to approach it. You've got to approach it that way.
Different, right? It's a different world. And I acknowledge that.
You don't want that to be a negative experience or environment. But I think in pro sports, I do wonder, and I watch this closely in college football because I love college football, but I also have seen and detected a difference in tone from head coaches and the way they talk about their own players in the NIL era, because they're now essentially professional football players. and you're going to see a different approach to that because of that. And I think it's one of the things I watch and listen for as much as anything. How do coaches, everyone talks about sports, how do you handle adversity? In their world, losing a game is adversity. And I was surprised yesterday Matt Eberflus was as positive as he was. I didn't like it given the circumstances and given what they squandered in Indy. I felt like it demanded a more hold them accountable in a tougher way, a little more tougher love. You can love your players a little more tougher love, because I don't know if the Bears are going to learn from this as much as maybe they should learn from this. That was a stinker of a loss. When you look at their schedule, it's going to hurt at the end of the year. So I didn't like what I heard from Matt Eberflus. And then later in the day, I see the way Antonio Pierce addressed his team. I don't know if I like that either, but it certainly is different.
I like the conversation for certain. And I do think you want to know, particularly with a group that's as big as a football team, who are your tone setters? You got to have tone setters in the coaching staff. You got to have tone setters in the locker room. Who are they? And how does their voice make an impact? And so it doesn't always have to be loud, but your voice has to strike the right chords. And so this is, again, I can't state enough how critical this week is ahead. These next 6-7 days for the Bears to kind of establish and prove who they want to be in 2024. I think this week for a September game is as important as you're going to get in the direction of a football franchise.
I think it's a great way to put it. It's a great stage to set. A lot of good stuff this week. Anything else, Dan, before we get out of here?
No, we'll be keeping our eyes on Wednesday on whether Keenan Allen is back from whatever kept him from traveling to Indianapolis. Keep that storyline on the radar for a little while. Obviously, his heel is still a bother, but he was not in Indianapolis either, so that's worth keeping tabs on. And then you just want to keep an eye on the Bears' offensive line. It felt like Matt Pryor had supplanted Nate Davis as the preferred option at right guard. He played all 90 snaps, 89 of them at right guard, 1 at left tackle when Braxton Jones had to leave the game. So you may have a little bit of a permanent change there going forward, I think.
Looking forward to seeing what happens there, because that was a very interesting development. I guess I want to be consistent. You question Matt Eberflus's post-game approach at the podium. I have to respect the way he approached pregame in terms of accountability. He benched Nate Davis, and there's no doubt about that. And that's something I think you like to see if you're a Bears fan, your head coach following through with the words that he said early in the week.
Actions louder than words, right?
Absolutely. So thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on 670 Scores YouTube page. We'll be back later in the week with our predictions and taking a look at the Rams and Bears back in Chicago on the lakefront Sunday at noon. For Adam Sadzinski, our producer, Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show. We'll talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.